Have you ever witnessed strange lights in the sky or experienced missing time? If so, you're not alone. These high strangeness incidents happen to people every day, all over the world, and we want to get to the bottom of that. Since 1969, MUFON has been at the forefront of UFO investigations, and we're not stopping now. Join Alex and Ruben, a team of highly skilled MUFON field investigators with years of experience, committed to getting to the truth. We'll investigate UFO events through guest interviews and witness accounts, analyzing data from various sources. Let's work together to unravel the mysteries of the unknown and get answers to the questions that have been unanswered for so long.
Hello and welcome to MUFON Up Close. I'm your host, Alex Tusia, with my co-host, Ruben Iriarte.
Hey, Alex. Great to see you.
Nice to see you as well.
It was, we had a little break, but I'm glad we're back. We've got some interesting guests coming up in our future shows, and looking forward to that.
Yeah, it'll be a good upcoming season. We definitely have a really great guest today, and we got a couple of other special guests lined up in the near future.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to our guests. I've known her for many years and met her on a crop circle expedition that she signed up for, and it was fantastic. We saw a lot, and it's just great to see her enthusiasm and all the hard work that she's been putting in over the years for MUFON and her production shows. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, she does. She does quite a bit. Let me introduce her and give you a little introduction to her. Jennifer Stein is our guest. She is the Sedona State Section Director for the MUFON organization. MUFON is, of course, the Mutual UFO Network. And this is an international organization made up of volunteers trained as field investigators, researchers, and writers who are dedicated to the scientific investigation of the UFO phenomena for the betterment of humanity. MUFON archives are filled with over 50 years of UFO reports from around the world. Within the U.S., the organization is structured state by state, and in Canada, structured by its provinces. Between Canada and the United States, there are, on average, over 10,000 UFO reports logged each year. Jennifer has served as a Pennsylvania State Section Director since 2002 and a Sedona State Section Director since 2022, running programs in Sedona. Jennifer holds a unique role for MUFON, focused on public outreach and education, hosting MUFON speakers on the UFO subject and related fields of unusual phenomena. She hosts public education meetings once a month, live and in person and on Zoom. While Jennifer is a trained field investigator, her time is spent on education and community outreach. Professionally, Jennifer evolved into a documentary filmmaker, creating 3 award-winning documentary films on the UFO subject. It Could Happen Tomorrow, part of the Disclosure Dialogues, both from 2011, and Travis, the true story of Travis Walton, and the 2023 film Accidental Truth. In addition, Jennifer has produced many small film segments and projects for researchers, authors, and investigators over the years, promoting their research, websites, and publications. Many of these can be found at her website, onwingsproductions.com. She's best known for her film Travis, the true story of Travis Walton, produced in 2015 and remastered in 2018. The film focuses on the 40th anniversary of the Travis Walton UFO experience, one of the most famous UFO cases from Arizona, and arguably the United States as well. So please join us in welcoming Jennifer Stein.
Yay!
Such an honor to be here. So great that you remembered our crop circle trip.
Yeah.
Because that trip was supposed to be 35 people. 35. And I had wished the day before that I just hired a guide and I could just go with my video camera and meet all the experts and talk. And then you called me like 20 minutes later and said, "You want the good news or the bad news?" And I couldn't believe it. I had literally thought I should just be going with a guide. I didn't know it was going to be a Spanish-speaking trip, but Jaime Maussan canceled and all of his 36 people with him canceled. And then your fiance canceled, and I think 2 other couples were coming, and one of them had a heart attack, and they all stayed back. And it was you and I. It was unbelievable. And we've been best friends ever since.
Yes, that's so fantastic. And then you got involved with MUFON, and look at you.
Ruben, I remember sitting in the car when we got locked out of our bed and breakfast. We just sit in the car all night one night. And I said, Ruben, I want to join a MUFON group. And he said, well, there isn't one in Philadelphia. You have to start one. And I went, I don't want to start one. I just want to join one. And here we are.
Here we are.
Years later.
Amazing.
So it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for hosting.
Where was that first crop circle that you guys met? Where were you?
Well, we flew to England, and we were in the Wiltshire area, but we were specifically in the Vale of Pewsey, where we were staying in an Airbnb, and we saw probably 25 or 30 crop circles that year alone in the week and a half that we were there.
Wow!
And we met with, of course, Linda Moulton Howe and Bert Jansen, and the people from Germany, the other researchers, and it was just really a wonderful experience.
Wasn't that great that we flew in a helicopter?
Oh yes,
they took the doors off.
Yeah, that was with Nancy Talbot, I think, wasn't? Oh no, she was going to go up with us, and we tried to make arrangements with her, and then it didn't work out. But we went ourselves. Yeah, and it was great.
You were, I believe, in the back seat. And
yes.
The pilot removed the doors, and then so you're only hanging with the seatbelt.
That's right. That's it. You couldn't have anything flapping. And when you tipped to film, you were just held in with the 2 straps of the seatbelt, and that was it. And you just prayed you didn't fall out.
Yeah.
It was
what a view.
Yeah.
I've got some pictures that you took of me in some of the crop circles. When one of these days we'll like to share them with you.
That would be fantastic.
So now here we have you now talking. You're working on the Travis Walton programs. His 50th anniversary is coming up, and
that's right. It's hard to believe. I produced the documentary Travis, the true story of Travis Walton, of course, for the 40th anniversary, thinking that that was very monumental, never anticipating the 50-year anniversary coming down the pike. But I'm so glad that I took that initiative, because people who are captured in the film, like Sheriff Marlon Gillespie, Chuck Ellison, who was the deputy working with Marlon on the Travis's, missing story, the UFO and homicide and potential murder of Travis was a big deal in the news in 1975. So to get their testimonies about what it was like for them is hugely important, and they're gone now. And also we have Cy Gilson in the film, who was the chief polygraph examiner in the state of Arizona in 1975. Wow. And I went and interviewed him in his home too in 2014. And I'm so glad I did, because they're gone. And we also lost this past year John Goulet, who opens the film. He's kind of sitting in a park. He was a truck driver when we made the film. He was driving and happened to be near Arizona. So He stopped his truck near a park. We hiked into a park, put him on a park bench, shot the interview, and then he went back to work, like driving to Texas or something. We were so lucky we got him for the film. So, and I'm so glad we did, because we just lost him too. Wow. So it's, as time marches on, stories like the Travis Walton case need to be documented. They need to be archived. There's so many incredibly important stories from the 70s and from the 60s. And these are important stories because this is a time before the internet, right? This is a time before digital photography and, digital filmmaking and, CGI and all the things that we now need to deal with, which becomes so impossible to sort out fact from fiction and, truth from a falsehood. But Travis Walton's case stands continually as one of these predominantly, I don't know what you would call it, a poster child UFO case, because it was involving 7 people, because it was lie detections involved, which never happens with a UFO case. It's way too expensive to do that. Yeah. So it really stands the test of time, and it's one of the most heavily debunked cases still.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's hard for me to believe it's 50 years now. And it's hard for Travis too, to realize. But I'm glad that people are coming together to honor him and to recognize the contributions he's made to the UFO field.
Wow.
Yeah.
His incident that happened on November 5th, I believe, 1975?
1975, November 5th. Yeah. Yeah. So we all, a lot of us probably remember where we were. I had my own UFO sighting just actually before that in 1975 as well, in September of 1975. So even though it stayed in my gray box and I didn't really get involved in the UFO field for 25 years, but it was there. So there was a lot of activity in 1975. And there were a number of nuclear bases also that went, that had UFO flyovers and UFOs rendering their nuclear weapons inert. I was just on the phone with someone yesterday. I don't know if it was Jim Delatoso or someone else who was saying, a lot was going on. Oh, it was Antonio Huneeus. Antonio was saying there was a huge amount that went on in that year leading up to, like in things in September and October of 1975, which I didn't recall.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How did you get to know Travis?
Well, we have a mutual friend, all of us. I know Ruben knows Peter Robbins, who's a writer and lives in New York. He's a good friend of your producer, Bill Forte, as well. So I was asked by Peter if I'd come to Roswell and sort of just be his assistant, because there was a lot to coordinate with those large Roswell UFO conferences. And he knew I had the skills to help him. So I flew out and did, whatever was needed. I was what they called the quick runner. Drive to the airport, pick this person up, hang these posters, do whatever, introduce this speaker. So Travis was there that year. And at the end of the conference, we all went out to dinner at a place called Peppers, I think, with Ruben. Ruben was sitting there. And Peter Robbins and Ruben and I said to Travis, your experience is one of the most profound UFO experiences, certainly as big as Roswell is. But Roswell was 1947. Yours was 1975. Yours is a lot more current. It's, 1947, I wasn't even born yet, so for the upcoming generations, the newer generations, we thought that Travis should host a conference up in Snowflake and turn that area, Snowflake, Heber, or Holbrook, into its own little Roswell. That was the idea. Because there are so many small conferences now around major flaps, and some of them even just around a famous picture. Like the McMinnville UFO conference draws over 5,000 people now to attend. And that's over the Trent pictures of a UFO, right? And then there's Pine Bush, New York, because of the Hudson Valley flaps. Yeah. And there's Exeter, New Hampshire, that happens every year. And Peter's involved in that too. And that conference happens because of the UFO events that happens and continue to happen in that region. And I think, so I know I'm dragging on.
No, please, because
what's really interesting is that the Walker Air Force Base, I think that's what they call it now in Roswell, they changed the name of the Air Force Base in Roswell after that UFO encounter, because the 509th Bomb Squad was there and they didn't want to draw attention to Roswell. Right. So what they did is they moved the 509th Bomb Squad, I think, to Pierce Air Force Base in New Hampshire, which is right near Exeter. And the UFO phenomenon followed the Air Force Base's move of the nuclear, delivery system we had at that time. So, there's all these little small conferences that are based around phenomenal UFO stories. And so while we're sitting at dinner, drinking a bottle of wine at Pepper's restaurant in Roswell, Ruben and Peter and I said to Travis, why don't you think about doing a 40th? Because at that point it was 2010 and it was the 35th anniversary coming up. And we said, you should plan for the 40th. It's 5 years away. That's easy doable. We plan a conference in 5 years. We can do that. So that's how it started. And then Travis wanted to take the people who showed up at the conference up to the forest at night and show them and explain to them what he experienced at night. And I said, Travis, that's like, taking 100 people on a 45-minute walk through the forest at night. There's no bathrooms, there's no lights, there's nothing around up there. Some people have canes or walkers. Exactly how is that going to work? And from an insurance perspective, I had been an event coordinator. So I did weddings, bar mitzvahs, 40th, 50th, 60th birthday parties, corporate, events. And I said, that's an insurance nightmare. Like I thought that was the stupidest thing to try to do. We actually ended up doing it because Travis really wanted to. But this is how the film got started. And this is kind of how I developed a relationship with Travis. I said to Travis, look, let me fly out there and I'll shoot interviews with all the guys, all the living crew members, because at that point we had already lost two of them, Alan Dallas and I'm blanking on the other guy's name who we had lost at that point. Anyway, we'd already lost two crew members. And I said, why don't I shoot interviews with all of them? And then from the comfort of a conference room, we'll show these interviews and we'll show the forest to people via film, because I was already doing some film work at that point. And he thought that was a good idea. So we did that. And then gradually Travis began to trust me more. And I began to really develop insight and a lot of respect for Travis. And I realized that with a couple of other interviews, like Cy Gilson, Marlon Gillespie, Chuck Ellison, maybe some other family members who wanted to come forward, and all the UFO experts I knew at that point, getting involved in MUFON, I realized that I'd already been doing 10 years worth of MUFON work at that point, thanks to Ruben, who said, you got to start a MUFON group. So I approached, many people who I knew the Travis Walton story. And I said, would you be willing to, go on camera and tell me what you think? So I interviewed a lot more people than we have in the film. I could probably do a mini series on the Travis Walton case if I put the time into it. But that's what happened. Gradually, Travis developed trust in me. And we just developed a great friendship and a great, working relationship. And then the film got produced for the 40th anniversary conference. So we did a 39th, and then we also did a 40th anniversary in Snowflake. But we couldn't continue to launch those conferences because we couldn't get any support or interest. And Travis really needed someone to help him completely organize the conferences. And I was living in Philadelphia up until recently, when I moved to Arizona in 2021. So that's kind of how it developed. It was very organic. And I'm an Aries, so I tend to say, oh, yeah, I can do that. And then I go, oh, my goodness, what did I get myself into? And I usually have to get myself out of pickles once I get myself into them. But it's turned out to be really a well-received film, an award-winning film. And I think it helps provide some acknowledgement for these boys in the crew. None of them wanted to come forward, including Travis.
Yeah.
But none of them could stay silent because they had to report Travis missing. So it's a really interesting, deep psychological perspective when you think about it. When a lot of people see UFOs, they don't even report it. Only 1 in 10 get reported, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about it, there are say roughly around 10,000 reports between Canada and the United States a year. That means there's at least 100,000 sightings, at least. And that's just the United States and Canada.
That's amazing. The thing that always impressed me, Jennifer, about Travis is that I heard him a number of times at different events, and he always was right on target. I mean, he never really deviated from his presentation or his experience, and that's what. And I never got tired of listening to him. It was always like that man experienced something literally out of this world. And
You got it.
to hear him talk about what went through his mind when he was confronted with those with beings, the Nordic type beings and the gray type beings, and what his fears. I mean, it's ongoing. And so I had a chance to go back to one of the links that you sent us of your interview with him, the 4th anniversary. And it was great for me to hear that, because it brought back, I was able to remember his story. But then again, and I thought, man, he's been right on purpose, because he said if he didn't do this, he had so many debunkers out there, people that were trying to poo-poo his experience, and he said it was important for me to get out there and tell, and educate the people on what's going on. And
yes, and the debunking is amazing. They have an easy job, as we know. All they have to do is cast doubt. They have to then they do that by confusing the audience, making their listening audience feel like they're not smart enough to figure it out or read the book or go to a conference and hear Travis himself. And they think that no one else has done the research. When debunkers go big on it, very few of them ever call me and say, hey, do you have any, information that could lead to a better understanding of this? Is there any way that these boys could have seen a lighthouse and, a fire tower instead of a UFO, which is the leading current debunking.
Oh, yeah.
Story that's out there. Oh, they just saw a lighthouse. Well, if you take that apart, it's not too hard to put 2 and 2 together. Those fire towers are important for protection of forest, and they are always at the top highest point of the forest. And the Sitgreaves National Forest is thousands of acres. I mean, it could be even over 1 million. It's the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world where they were working, and it stretches from parts of New Mexico straight on through northeastern Arizona and up into Utah and Colorado. And it's a very, very high plateau. It's about 7,000 feet high. So they weren't working on the top of the Bermuda Rim. They were working in the Turkey Springs Valley. So nobody's going to put a fire tower in the valley. And the closest fire tower was 5 miles away from them. So what I did when that debunking started is I posted some of my drone footage right on the Travis Walton video page. And I created a debunking page to post videos of all the people.
Nice.
And I posted the drone footage. We flew right from the actual site. So the drone goes up, it turns 360 degrees all the way around. There is no way in God's loving earth you can see the fire tower from the Turkey Springs Valley where they were. So there's no possible way it could have been that. Besides that, the fire tower has a base to it, right? A 90-foot base, or at least. And recently I was there with a young new podcaster named Patrick James, who lives here in the Phoenix area. And he's doing a special he's coming out with shortly about the Travis case. So we drove up there together again and interviewed Travis. And we stopped at this Gentry fire tower and we all tried to throw stones at it, and we actually videotaped it. We said, look, let's actually show this. So we tried to throw stones at it because Travis said this, and all the boys in the crew said, this craft was hovering 20 feet off the ground. You could have hit it with a stone easily. And there's no way we could hit the fire tower with a stone. We throw that high, and none of us. So, these debunkers don't really have a leg to stand on when you kind of dig deeper. But again, all they have to do is cast doubt, and they've done their job, and it's a shame. But there has to be a reason. I say, well, why is it that they want to debunk this subject? And that's the deeper psychological dig that has to go on. And those of us in the UFO field have had to do that with ourselves, right? We've had to say, oh my God, what is the solid ground I stand on? The nature of your personal reality shifts tremendously when you have an encounter, as both of you probably know. And your life is never quite the same after that. And having had that experience myself, and having my incident stay in my own gray box for 25 years before I realized I wasn't alone, there was somebody else who saw the same thing I saw. Then I was like, okay. Then I had at least another leg to stand on. And Travis had 7 legs to stand on, his own and 6 other
others. Yeah.
So, and the fact that they didn't really want to come forward. I mean, they were all Mormons. We have to remember that. They were ostracized by their families and by their community. It was terrible for them. And in many cases, this instance ruined a lot of their lives, and, to some extent. I mean, they made the best of it, and Travis has as well. But, what do you do when you're 19 and 20 years old and the whole world is calling you a liar and you're being accused of murder? I can't imagine how difficult it was for all of them, and also for Travis. I can't imagine, as a young man, trying to put this all in perspective and having the whole world know what happened. It's very difficult. And for that alone, we need to recognize him at this anniversary, I think. So,
how do you think that the movie The Fire in the Sky, how do you think that portrayed the event?
Well, it definitely captured the emotional and psychological difficulty that the crew members were experiencing, for sure. Mm-hmm. Tracy Torme did a great job with that. But where Paramount kind of went off the rails was the way Hollywood typically does with the onboard the craft abduction experience that Travis had, and the memory that he has of meeting 2 different species, both of grays and what we might refer to as human-looking Nordics that look, act, talk, probably talk. We don't know. They didn't talk to him, but he did encounter people that he thought were human, and then the small grays as well. And it's another thing for us to remember. This is 1975. You were not hearing about beings usually. You were hearing about craft in the sky. Mm-hmm. The only people that came out with stories about beings that I knew about was the Betty and Barney Hill case from the 60s. And they, of course, were very reluctant to come forward as well. So Fire in the Sky did a good job, but they failed at the onboard the craft experience. And they really failed, I think, at the psychological opportunity they had to open up people's minds to the fact that this phenomenon is real. It's been going on for probably thousands of years, but certainly what I have researched and documented, that certainly the last 80 years it's been going on, right? And it has been debunked for probably 75 of those 80 years. We're only living in a new era in the last 5 years, which is very interesting to me. Like a lot has happened. Like COVID happened, right? That changed everyone's thinking. The UFO situation opened up. So I really think we're on the precipice of a new shift in consciousness. But Fire in the Sky did help move it in that direction, and it helped put his story even more on the map. And I'm hoping that my documentary fills in the gaps between the Hollywood version and the true version. And I couldn't believe no one had ever done the film. I mean, I was sitting in my office one day, probably in like 2013 or 14, when I guess it was around 2013 when it occurred to me maybe I'm producing something different than just something to be shown at a conference, you know, on a computer as a PowerPoint presentation. Maybe I'm producing a film. It just kind of like landed on my lap, and I went, oh, yeah. It's like when you find out you're pregnant, right? Like, oh, maybe I have something else going on here. So I became inspired and decided to work on the film, and I'm really glad I did.
Going back to some of the debunking, I was reading of that up there in the forest area where they had cut down the trees, and then the tree trunks were exposed. And what they discovered were that the rings of the tree was basically changed. It was moving toward the direction where the craft was at, if I recall.
Yes. This discovery, I have a short little video up called Site Review with Ben Hansen on the debunking page at traviswaltonthemovie.com. So we decided to do a site review, and God bless Ben Hansen. This was his idea. I didn't really think it was necessary, and I didn't think we would actually use it in the film. But I said, what the heck, it's a day. I'm out here anyway. Let's take the cameras. Let's go up with Ben. And we did all sorts of testing in the forest. We used a drone camera. God bless Gary Hilton, who came up and filmed that day with his drone. So what we did is we mapped out the area with yellow sticker tape, and we started to walk around in a circle and just say, okay, what is in this 40, 50 foot diameter of where this craft was? Is there anything unusual? And since the Rodeo Chetasai fire had happened, I think that was in 2006, they had, felled or, cut a lot of the trees that were severely burned, but their center part, their stumps were still quite visible. And now they were tabletop stumps you could look at or sit on, right? Mm-hmm. Have your coffee on. And they were about waist high. And we started walking around and looking at them. And we began to realize that we already knew there was some rapid tree ring growth because of the sampling that had been done in 1991 when Mike Rogers discovered the trees seemed to be taller on this ridge than they were in the surrounding area, because they knew the area well. And they'd been back there many times. Many of them had gone back on their own. And the one time they were going there with a film crew, they weren't quite sure it was the right area because it was in the middle of a snowstorm and they couldn't see the road or the trail, but the trees were like way too big in 1991. And this was about 15 years after the event. And Mike began to think, I better go sample some of these trees and see what's going on, because he could just see the trees were taller. So when we were walking around with Ben Hansen and Travis and I, we all started to look down at these stumps, and we all made the same realization at the same time, that the rapid tree ring growth was only on one side of the tree, right? Was more on one side than the other. The other hadn't kind of grown rapidly at all, but the tree ring growth was different on each single tree, which is unique, all around in a circle, and the rapid growth pointed epicentrically to where the craft had been. So we began to think, certainly Ben, he's a scientist, he began to think, well, maybe there was a large amount of radiation exposure that happened. We know Travis got zapped and probably killed by this huge, bolt of lightning that came out of the craft. Maybe there was some sort of radiation exposure that was left there that impacted those trees. So Ben started to do research, and we found that there had been a tree there that had been cut before 1975. It was probably some big, huge old oak or something like that. And it had a huge canopy, probably about a 35 to 40 foot canopy that was probably about 90 to 120 feet high. So when they cut that tree, that canopy left a hole where the UFO craft came down and was hiding in the canopy of the trees. It was below the top of the pine trees. That's why when they say it was only 20 feet off the ground and they could throw a stone to hit it, they were right. Those trees are about 90 feet high, and it was below the tops of the trees. So we walked around, we started to see this, and we filmed it quite deliberately and marked it and took pictures of it. And then Ben Hansen found that trees around the Chernobyl incident in Russia that were exposed to very high levels of radiation when that nuclear plant exploded. Those trees around that forest area were Scott pine trees, which are essentially the ponderosa pine tree. It's the same tree. It's a cousin of each other, right? And that's the majority of the trees that are there on that Mogollon Rim. So, according to this Polish study that was done on tree rings and how the wood fiber grows, and wood fiber has what we call a weft and a warp. They call it different things like XLM or something like that, XLM and phlegm or something. I don't know the dendrology terms. But what happens with radiation exposure is both of those two growths, warp and weft, are extra stimulated when exposure to radiation occurs. So the trees around Chernobyl grew at a 36% growth rate, which is unheard of. Trees don't grow in a rapid spurt of growth like that. Increased sunlight from a tree that's felled or taken down, exposing more sunlight will create a 10% growth, but not a 36 time or 33.3 times greater tree ring growth, and in both directions of the warp and weft simultaneously.
Wow.
So that was interesting to us. So I actually approached the University of Arizona, where I am an alumni. I have a Bachelor of Science in Textiles from the University of Arizona, and they have a great dendrology department. So on the day that I was interviewing Cy Gilson, who lived just a short distance south of the University of Arizona in Tucson, I stopped at the campus, and I had sent this Polish research study that was from a peer-reviewed journal to 10 different heads of the department, of the dendrology department. And I didn't identify that I was doing research on a UFO case. I said I was an alum and I was a filmmaker, and I discovered in the process of my filmmaking this discovery, and there was a potential that it could be radiation. And at that point, when I was married, I had a family foundation where I could contribute money to the university to do research on this. And I asked them if they would meet with me to look at the data I had and to begin to discuss a research project for the students at the university. I was removed by campus police.
No.
4 campus police came in. They knew me by name. They took my camera, my tripod, and equipment, which I didn't bring in to film. I brought in because I had a rental car and I didn't want to leave it on campus in the rental car. So I brought it in with me. But because I was carrying equipment that maybe looked like a rifle or something, I don't know. And all the heads of the different departments that I had written slammed their doors shut as soon as I got into the building. And I was removed by campus police and drove off campus. And I was like, okay, all right. So I guess that further research could really or should still be done. But I'll tell you something else, which is really kind of sad and devastating, but it shows the extent that debunkers will go to destroy the evidence. So I told you I went up to the forest December of 2024 with Patrick James and Travis and one of Patrick's really nice film assistants. And we got to the site and we started to walk around, and all the tree stumps that had been there in 2014 that showed the rapid growth had probably, I'm guessing, gasoline poured on them. They were set on fire and they were hatcheted apart with a hatchet. There was maybe one left that they
vandalized. Yeah.
They were vandalized. So the evidence was attempted to be destroyed. But what this podcaster probably didn't realize is that another wonderful man named Gary Holloway, who is a friend of Travis's and lives in Mississippi, he had cut and taken samples like this much off of those trees in the previous year. So we still do have some evidence around in different homes and things like that. My film producer, co-producer Bob Terrio has some in his home. And so there's still the evidence there. So those of us in the know just kind of sit back and say, well, okay.
Wow. You know, Jennifer, it kind of reminds me, the analogy of going back to the crop circles where they where certain formations were already harvested or mowed over, right, by the farmers, and then the image of the crop circle was still there, and then there's been research where the wheat stalks in the formation were actually much more healthier. They grew quicker back compared to the outside. I forgot. Yeah, the outside controls.
Yes. Well, you and I did sampling, right, for Nancy. Yeah. We worked a full day, sun up to sundown. So whenever you sample inside the formation and then outside the formation.
That's what it reminded me of. When I saw the rings,
absolutely.
And now you're saying that there is some sort of change based on the exposure or whatever energy that the trees were receiving.
Yes. Well, God bless William Levengood, who did that germination study research on the seeds from various plants, because he determined that those seeds had been exposed to some sort of radiation or some sort of microwave or something. He was able to duplicate the end result in seed germination studies. So he would take crops from crop circles, on the top, the seeds from inside a crop circle formation, and germinate them and see how fast they grew in a 12-day germination chamber. Mm-hmm. And then he had controls that he would also test, and those did not germinate the same way. They were, they grew at maybe a more normal or variegated rate, but not an increased rapid rate as many of the crop circle seeds did grow. But he also discovered that if a crop circle happened early in the germination process, where the crop was brand new and just coming out of the ground, the seed growth was then stunted. It held back the growth of many plants like wheat or barley or soybeans. So I found that really fascinating. Certainly the crop circle research that I did with you really got my science brain ticking. Certainly when I started to read the peer-reviewed journals, and I started to read about the chemical analysis and the changes in the crop and the plant and the soil. The amount of magnetite that was in the soil inside a formation versus outside, and how you could drag a magnet across the ground. And
I forgot about that.
Stick to it, right? And it would be dry. It would be as dry as like a drywall. And yet it could be muddy outside the formation, but it was so totally dry inside. So very, very interesting, correlations there. When you apply science and theories and, test and thinking and observation. That's really how scientific methodology is formed. You make observations, then you test those observations against a theory, and you prove yourself right or wrong. And you have to be willing to accept the data one way or the other. And people forget that now.
For the affected crops, are you still able to eat them, or are they, not edible at that point?
Actually, interesting, you mentioned this. William Levengood set up a lab in his home, and he would do these germination studies, as I was explaining, right? And then he would only do studies for 12 or 14 days, and then that was his data, and he wasn't interested in what happened next. So he dumped them in baggies and put them in his basement, right? And these crops would continue to grow in his basement. He had like a forest in his basement. And his friends would come over, like, various people who helped him would come over to his house, and he'd say, "Can you take out the trash?" And they'd go downstairs and say, "My God, you've got corn, you've got barley, you've got soybeans." And these things were growing in baggies without sunlight, right? And without water for months in his basement. So that tells you something about the exposure. From his research, he actually patented something called the MRI stress guard with John Burke, who'd written a book about crop circles and many other things. So John Burke was a geomancy expert, sort of an earth science expert. So what they determined was that, yes, these crops would grow faster. better, stronger, resist disease, would not need to use pesticides. If they were exposed to a short burst of radiation, the seed gets challenged, but then the seed recovers. And before it's planted, it has stronger durability because the seed has self-healed. Interesting concept, huh? Self-healing in a seed. And then that seed is stronger, more resistant to disease, more resistant to drought, has greater output. Like seed heads of wheat and barley would have maybe 10 or 15 seed heads on it, but the crop circles had 20 to 30 seed heads on them. So it had greater output when it didn't matter what it was, if it was corn, if it was barley, if it was soybeans, oil seed rape, it didn't matter. It all had the same effect. So he went and patented something that he was hoping would be a product that would, benefit him in his life and John Burke's. And it was called the MRI stress guard. And I think, I don't know, but, once Monsanto came out with glyphosates and Roundup and made all our crops Roundup ready, right? That got dumped in the trash. But boy, wouldn't that be fantastic? And I wonder, we always think about the UFO connection with the crop circles, right? Because they're not there the night before and then suddenly they are the next day, right? So, boy, wouldn't it be interesting if these intelligent beings, right, were trying to give us messages in the field, agroglyphs in the field, to bring us together, get us outside, right, get us walking around a field in amazement, expanding our consciousness, talking about how could this happen? This is incredible. This is major art in a wheat field. It's huge. And then the food that is growing in that field is more durable. Those seeds that if they get picked up or put into the seed feed starts to generate and create stronger crops that are more durable, that can grow with less water, that are more drought tolerant, that are more insect tolerant. I mean, isn't that an interesting concept?
Yeah, it's amazing to compare the scientific studies from plants, crops to UFOs, and then inside the forest area.
That's called expanded thinking, right?
Expanded
consciousness, but leave it to Jen to go there.
Something real quickly I wanted to share, going back to Travis's incident, his experience, was the gentleman, when they went back to the site and they didn't find his body, they were searching, they were looking for him, but they all bundled together. They were like shoulder to shoulder. And looking around. That I was involved in another case. I was helping with Washington MUFON on the elk abduction case, where a group of loggers were working on, or were out there in the field, or they were replanting seedlings, and then one of them saw this object picking up an elk, and several of the other witnesses saw it too, and it picked up the elk and took it over the row of trees and straight up into the sky. And what I remember them telling me was that they were concerned. The rest of the working crew were very concerned, and so in order for the boss to get them back into doing their job, he had them all bundled together, and they were looking around. They were looking up in the sky, wondering if this thing was going to come back and maybe take a person. And that always reminded me of Travis Walton, the same kind of fear. Even the elk that did that, they form a protective circle. So both here you had a herd of elk, and then here you had these guys, practically just a few feet away, just looking up. Amazing.
Yeah. Well, that's the logical thing to do. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to say, well, maybe they have the energy to pick up one, but then to pick up 4 of us, it's going to be heavier, or 6 of us, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Cattle do that all the time in cattle mutilation stories. You hear this from farmers all the time, that the cattle are all herded, in the far corner of the field against the fence in a tight herd. They don't want anything to do with the missing, where the missing calf, was dropped. They're far, far from it. So yes, these boys were definitely freaked out. All the loggers that night. I mean, that's why they slammed the door and drove away, because they were convinced Travis was dead. He made no attempt to break his fall once he landed. So and Mike Rogers actually was responsible for their lives. I think he did the right thing. And so does Travis. Travis is convinced that Mike did the right thing by slamming the door and driving away. And they only went to the top of the Mogollon Rim. So they were in a valley, the Turkey Springs Valley, and they weren't really on what you call a road. It was a clearing to get the truck down there with their equipment, but it wasn't really a road. I mean, it was forest area, and they had to drive around some stuff sometimes to get in and out. And when they got to the top of the Mogollon Rim, what few people realize, and I think this is important to note in the Travis story, is that Mike said, I got to go back and get Travis. I'm the crew boss. I am responsible here. I don't know what I'm facing, but help me turn the truck around. I'll leave you guys up here on the Mogollon Rim, because that was a dirt road and people did traverse that. And they were hoping maybe someone would come by with some guns or something and help them, or they could at least get help or tell somebody to go for help. They were panicked, and some of them were crying. I mean, they were really freaked out, but they could still see the craft below them, because they were up on a rim and they could see the light that they had originally seen when they were below the craft approaching it in the valley. They could see the same light, so they knew the craft was there. And while they're turning the truck around, the craft flew away. So they knew the craft wasn't there. So they all piled back in the truck to go back to find Travis, because they figured they could all help carry him, because they figured he was dead. Yeah. I mean, they didn't know what they were going to do, and they didn't know how they were going to report it. And, there's a million things going through your mind at that moment. But the fact that they all went back and they all kind of were shoulder to shoulder or arm length to arm length, they had one flashlight between them. They turned the truck on an angle to kind of put the light beams of the truck up on the slight hill that Travis had run up. And they couldn't find him anywhere. And they called him and called him and called him. And some of the guys broke down and cried. They were just freaked out. And then, of course, they were thinking, how the heck are we going to report this? Right? They like, my gosh, I can't imagine that 45-minute ride down the hill that day.
Yeah.
And one of the most honest, forthright, religious guys, Kenny Peterson, said, I'll call, because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt what's true and what I saw, and I'm not afraid to stand in my truth. So he volunteered to make the phone call to the police headquarters, which was in Holbrook, and it was Marlon Gillespie that got the call. And then he called Chuck Ellison, who lived closer, because you have to remember these areas, they're all about 30 miles apart from each other. So it's 30-minute drive back and forth between Holbrook, Heber, Snowflake, and where they were working on the Mogollon Rim was another 45-minute switchback up to the top of the rim from the closest town, which was Heber. So when Marlon called Chuck showed up, and he was the first one to meet them and started investigating, started, sniffing around. Like, is there alcohol here? Mm-hmm. What do you got? Beer cans in the back of the truck? What are you smoking? Right? Could he smell marijuana? He was just very, not so much suspicious, but I would say investigatively, he put that cap on and said, okay, I got to cover all my bases here. Now, what's also really interesting, some of your viewing audience might like to hear this. Do I have time to just share a quick story, or do we need to go to a break?
Why don't we hop into break, and then when we come back from the break, we'll hop into the story.
I will. Remind me, it's the Chuck Ellison story.
The Chuck Ellison story. Perfect.
to your seats, Cosmic Explorers. KGRA Digital Broadcasting, the unrivaled #1 source for raw, uncensored paranormal and UFO talk radio, has just unleashed a sizzling online merch store. Stay cosmic on the move with accessories, rugged phone cases, vibrant yoga mats, and notebooks perfect for jotting down UFO sightings. Ignite your obsession with the unexplained through bold, exclusive gear that demands attention. Kicking off with the Supernova, the store launches 2 heart-pounding collections, KGRA Digital Broadcasting and Bishop James Long. Every item you grab helps power the network and its groundbreaking shows. Stand with the truth seekers, act fast, score your stellar swag, and join the uprising today.
So you don't care about his life. You just care about covering up your little top secret stuff going on. Meanwhile, this man's dying. How dare you put these people in the military to defend us, and then when they come out, you just kick them to the curb.
As UFO reports come in from around the world, the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, is there. We continue to explore new cases and build our massive database. We share our information with the world in a number of ways. If you'd like to be part of our investigative team, you are always welcome. What could be more exciting than exploring the UFO question firsthand? Join MUFON, find your friends.
And we're back. You were about to hop into your Chuck Ellison story, Jennifer.
Yes. So I was explaining that Chuck Ellison was the first deputy on site, and he was smelling around to see if he could pick up any scent of marijuana, or looking in the back of the truck, or, you know, smelling the breath of these crew members to see if they had signs of alcohol or something on them, because he didn't quite understand, how does a crew member go missing? Right? When they got down off the Mogollon Rim that day when Travis was hit by this beam, and then they couldn't find him when they went back to get him, and they had to report him missing, they were like, oh gosh, you know, how is this story going to go over? So Chuck shows up and he's smelling for everything, and he realizes pretty quickly the temperament of the crew. He can tell some of them are shaking, some of them are crying. He wants them to all go back up on the hill with him and start to look for Travis, which is, now it's 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. It's dark, right? And none of them want to go back up. But Mike Rogers and I think maybe Alan Dallas agreed to go back up with Chuck, and the rest of the crew went home. One of them drove Mike Rogers' truck home back to Snowflake. So Chuck Ellison was actually kind of sympathetic pretty early on, because he had had his own sightings, more than one, over his 25-year service. Now, when I interviewed Chuck, I asked him if he would let me film him, and he would answer that question. And he said, no, you have to turn your camera off, but I'll answer your question. And he did. He told us about some of his sightings, which was amazing sightings, dripping fire on a train track near a train in the town of, I think, Snowflake, and, you know, cars stopping to see it, and just weird stuff. Now, the other great thing is when I interviewed Sheriff Marlon Gillespie at his home in the summer of 2014, I thought I'm just going to jump on this as well and ask him. So I had all the cameras set up and I had the cameras rolling while I was testing sound. And I said, Marlon, the one thing I want to know is, Deb, you're the sheriff here. You have been for 40 years. Would you like to share anything unusual that you've seen? Have you had your own encounters as well? And he did. He shared it. And he signed my release. So I didn't put his sighting that he had in the documentary because it wasn't topic specific to the documentary. I could have woven it that way, but a filmmaker's job is to be really hard cutting about what doesn't go in the film and what the film storyline actually is. But I put that up at the website. So if you go to traviswaltonthemovie.com and you go to the debunking page and you'll find interview with Deputy or Sheriff Marlon Gillespie, it's the first thing off he says in the interview. And I posted his whole interview there for anyone to watch because I thought that it was really important. And then I've been contacted by several other film companies and production companies that have now licensed some of that footage because they thought it was such a good interview. So I loved the fact that these police officers were actually sympathetic. They couldn't admit it out to the public because their job is to, control the situation, right? And in some cases, calm any fear. But there had been a lot of sightings up in the Snowflake area. And it may have had something to do with all the atomic tests that were done in New Mexico. Because when you look as the crow flies from Trinity over to the Mogollon Rim, maybe you're talking 60, 80, 100 miles. But as the winds would flow, stuff would land on the rim probably sooner and fresher than it would on the lower regional areas. And the forest is an undisturbed area. So if you wanted to study what was happening from atomic fallout, maybe that's what the craft was there doing. It's a lot of speculation has gone into what was the craft doing there and why was it there? And, obviously they could hear the loggers earlier in the day. If they had been there before, they knew the loggers were there. I mean, it wasn't quiet when you got 7 guys with chainsaws working.
Yeah.
So, and there was actually a hunter nearby as well that day. I don't know if you've ever heard that story, but that's a very interesting one. I mean, I'm happy to share that. So I think it was during the time when the Tracy Torme film was being made, this incident came up. And Travis learned about it. I don't think he knew about it before, but I am sure that Marlon Gillespie did. So what happened is there was I think he was an FBI agent, an undercover FBI agent who was out in the forest in the Mogollon Rim area in the Sitgraves National Forest camping, taking a couple days off and hunting with his wife. And they were on an adjacent ridge camping. They weren't hunting per se right there, but they were camping there. And they had come back to their site and they saw the craft. They saw this bright light in the forest and they thought it was a fire as well. See, the logging crew knew it was too bright of a light in the canopy of the trees to be normal. As soon as they started to leave the forest, they saw it because they were heading uphill and it was just off to their right. And they thought it was a plane that maybe had crashed and was on fire in the canopy of the trees because it was bright, yellowish, fire-like light color. And it was strange. And it wasn't the moon because it was too low. It was in the canopy of the forest, right? And the moon was behind them and they could see that. And they knew the stars hadn't quite come out yet. And it wasn't a star gleaming through. It wasn't Jupiter. So this FBI agent with his wife called probably his higher ups in the FBI and said, look, I know these boys could go to jail for murder. But I saw the same thing they saw. Their accounts that you have on record, I've heard through the news, and it's exactly the same thing my wife and I saw. And I'm willing to come forward to defend their lives, because none of them should go to the electric chair for this. There was a craft, and I saw the craft fly away, and so did my wife.
Wow.
And we're divorced now, but she would come forward and speak. So I never got the name of this FBI agent, but I did hear that his uppers, his higher ups, or someone in the police department or something said, look, if we need you, we'll call you. But for the time being, keep yourself hidden and don't come forward, because you're basically, a secret FBI agent, and coming forward might expose who you are. Even though he was just there camping, it was hard for him to come forward without exposing who he is, where he works, who he works for, and it would complicate the story in a way that I think federal officials in the government didn't want to be connected. So I thought that was very interesting. But Tracy Torme met him, interviewed him, found him in California, interviewed him, and debated whether or not to put that in Fire in the Sky. And he decided not to write that into the story because this guy still was kind of undercover. And I guess he just felt like it would expose him if he wrote it into the story. But he called him and interviewed him. And then he told Travis about it. So I thought that was very interesting. I think Tracy found that factual data. So very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, like when there's a really good story, right? The more you dig, the more you find, like Roswell, right? People keep saying that, like this has been 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, we still keep finding stuff that comes forward. Letters come out of people's attics, right? Books come out of, people's closets that they wrote but never published. And the deathbed confessions continue to happen.
Yeah.
So.
Jennifer, I was wondering, the Native American or the indigenous community, the people living in that area, did they ever share with you their stories or?
Well, yes. Actually, I didn't speak to any Navajo search and rescue agents who were on site at the time, but Navajo Search and Rescue was involved with Travis's hunt, which went on for, I think, 4 full days. He was missing 5 days, but they did call the hunt off, I think, at the end of the 4th day. And there were roughly 5 or 6 groups of 10 to 15 people. So there was at least 50, 60 people, some days 100 people looking for Travis for those 5 days. But I will tell you this, I have been in touch with 2 lovely gentlemen who have written a book. Stan Millman and John Dover have written a book called, I think it's Navajo Marshals Speak Out on UFOs. And they're going to be presenters for me in November for Sedona MUFON.
Oh,
so
great.
There are tons of stories from, both the Navajo, the Sunni, the Pueblo. They for sure have been interacting. I mean, they refer to them as the star people, and they have healing stories. They have visitation stories. And of course, you can see it as well, evidenced in some of their petroglyphs all throughout the Southwest. So no doubt there's probably been visitations and study and maybe even habitation of the earth by other species for probably a millennium. But that didn't quite tie in to the Walton story per se, because there were no, indigenous family members that came forward that were affected. Although Travis did grow up with some stepchildren who I believe were from the Navajo tribe. His mom was divorced, and I think she took in 2 or 3 foster children. So Travis did grow up with some, and most people don't know that, but I don't know that it's a relevant fact for Travis's life, but it's reality. So he's still quite friendly and close with these people that he considers like family.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to make any other future
documentaries?
Yeah.
Oh, Alex, that's a big question, you know. I always have like the two angels on the shoulders, right? You know, this one talking and this one talking, right? Like we all do. People say, Jenya, you really should have produced a film about the crop circle, research you've done. And although I did begin one on that subject, I had 5 or 6 years there of my life that I kind of lost as my youngest daughter, Juliet, suffered with what we thought was a acoustic neuroma or schwannoma, an ear-related tumor, which ended up being a little more complicated than that. It was a vascular malformation in the back of her head, and she ended up having multiple surgeries, and we almost lost her a couple times, and she was in a coma for a short period. So that kind of interrupted my crop circle research, as it should, right? As it should. And that once that period of my life was through, I think the stress that I experienced during that period of time just made me want to kind of take a deep breath and go to the garden and, practice more yoga and meditate and find the gratitude that I had for her wellness. So, but I probably still have a crop circle video I haven't made that's under my belt. And I have worked on other projects and supported other projects that deal with things like ESP, precognition, things like that, which are a great interest of mine. But making a film is a huge undertaking, both financially and time-wise, and it's just really tricky, right? To sit down and spend hours and hours and hours in front of your laptop. It's a digital nightmare trying to collect everything, right? And edit and file the different things you need. So for the time being, I am working and supporting Ron James and MUFON Television, which I helped to develop. Ron and I started envisioning MUFON TV way back in 2008 and 2000. Yeah. In fact, I wrote a business plan for that, for MUFON and for Ron. And very much helped to finance the underwriting of that for 5 years before MUFON started evaluating and was willing to really get behind it. And now it's self-supporting, which is what we had always intended it to be. That's what the business plan was. So I kind of feel like I've made a couple contributions in a few important places.
You certainly have.
And I might like to just think about retiring and having some more fun. I try to ski every year and try to, find gardens to hang out in the summer, as I miss my garden in Philadelphia a great deal. So I don't know. I think I'm going to be maybe looking at an eco village or a garden or working with the earth more so in the future than making another documentary film. But who knows, right? Who knows?
I think I was reading, or you mentioned that you're looking at, hopefully they may air the documentary on Netflix and a couple of other.
Well, actually, I have to say, I think Netflix passed on it, but we are on something like 85 streaming platforms around the world.
Wow.
The film is in 4 major languages, plus then English subtitles on the bottom. So people who speak Spanish or Portuguese, I think we have it in Italian, and we have it in French, and we have it in English subtitles and Japanese. And so I also have it in the Czech language, or for Greece. What language do they speak in Greece? I forget what language that is, but someone has translated it as well for the country of Greece. I haven't yet gotten it up there. But anyway, it's out there. It does well on streaming platforms. And I get a lot of emails and, from people constantly who see it from the first time and didn't know the story and are moved and inspired by I I think the days of trying to get it's on Amazon Prime. So, Amazon Prime and Netflix, kind of like go neck and neck, and they kind of compete with each other. So if one picks it up, the other one doesn't necessarily want to carry it. And I think that's why. But I will tell you what was very interesting. This is the power of debunkers. In 2021, when the Erica Luke show kind of in April kind of took a veered turn, and Ryan Gordon was a main influencer of that. And he was the one that was starting to bring out what he called evidence that Travis was a juvenile delinquent and that the boys all saw a fire tower and, various things like that he was promoting. We did experience Amazon Prime taking it offline for a while. And I had to work with my attorneys and say, prove that this is incorrect or put it back up, because you would get a message that said, this is a controversial, film piece that's not documented as real. But, you have 7 people that all witness a murder, right? That's a slam dunk deal, right? No question asked. That person's going to the jail or the electric chair or whatever, if you've got 7 witnesses. But if you have 7 witnesses that all see a UFO, well, that doesn't exist. So that can't be true. So it's very interesting. It's finally now back up on Amazon Prime. But, that, was time consuming and costly and unnecessary, right? So that's the damage that debunkers do. And it's unfortunate. And many, many, many filmmakers like me encounter the same sort of thing.
Wow.
You get a deal in one place and then it ends up really not being a deal. And it's really taking the film out of the public domain rather than putting it in the public domain. And I've been through this with many well-known documentary filmmakers who sing their legal sad story to me. And I'm like, yes, I do understand. It's very, very hard. It's very hard to tell the truth.
Yeah.
People kind of they just don't want to hear it.
Just curious, Jennifer, that as we're approaching 50 years, is there something that you could say that really, I don't know what I'm trying to say is, these 50 years have been quite extraordinary, an extraordinary case that affected a number of people. What have been some of the learnings from that?
I would say trust. Travis and these crew members have never, ever changed their story. So over time, as we get older, I think what continues to grow for us is our ability to grow our own integrity. And I don't know anyone who has grown their personal integrity more than someone like Travis Walton, because he had no choice in coming forward. He had to anyway, because he was missing and the police were trying to find him. And then when he didn't come forward right away and his brother tried to protect him, he was accused of trying to hide information. But he was under such stress and confusion that, he had to go within. And as I look back on the archival footage, which I will be sharing some really interesting archival footage at the conference, I never got permission to be able to use it so much like in a documentary, but as a newscast piece, I can share some of it. And you see this young man who really grows over time. And I think that's what's important about honoring Travis at this landmark at the 50-year anniversary, because we don't live forever. Time is limited. It's important to pay attention to the truth, pay attention to the facts, and pay attention to who you resonate with, who you trust, and to whom you feel has clear integrity, which is what you were mentioning earlier to me, Ruben, because that's everyone who encounters Travis feels that. They know it. They know it in their deep inner sense. And I think as we grow, we develop our ability to have that inner knowing, that inner sense of reasoning. Although there are many influences that push fear right in our face, right? Fear, fear, fear all the time. But I think what we all have to do is find that strength like Travis found, and, find a way to, walk our path forward in our integrity. And all the members of the crew have done that. But they have been attacked and pulled apart and had debunkers take things that they've said and change it and edit it, just like Philip Glass used to do. He'd record something and then take out part of it and then put the words together in a different way and make something that somebody never said, or change the whole meaning or intention of what someone said to confuse the public. And that continues to go on today. And unless people really get that, really think twice, even with, other news that we hear these days, we're living in an AI boom, as you probably know. Yeah. And it's changing the way we understand the nature of reality, because depending on what we look for, we only get back what we're looking for. And our computers and our Google search engines and those algorithms want to please us, right? So we only get what we already think is real. And then we get to believe something that may not really be true. And that is really the precipice that we stand on right now. And that's why I thought it was really important to see if we could host a 50th anniversary conference. And since I was doing Sedona MUFON programs, I thought, well, maybe I could pull it off just there in Sedona. Yeah. And I think going forward, this is what the learning experience is for all of us, certainly in the UFO field. And it has been for the guys who are experiencers, like the guys in this logging crew. They've all had to do that deep soul searching themselves and know who they can trust, who they can't, why it's important to have trust, and how you want to live your life going forward. Yeah. So that, to me, I think that's the most important thing. That's my takeaway, right? Because we all get great challenges in our lives, some we don't expect. And finding the courage and the strength to face those challenges with love in your heart, gratitude, and peace of mind, and then bringing joy and knowledge and educating others around you and inspiring others around you is the great gift we all have the potential of doing. And that's what I hope this conference will do. And actually, I'm happy to talk a little bit about the conference.
Please. Please.
Your audience would like to know. So we decided we were going to show accidental truth. We put a subtitle together for the conference called Secrecy to Transparency, because we've been living with 85 years or 80 years of secrecy, right? And now the last 5 years. Oh, okay. Yes, we can talk about UFOs. They're real. And how do you do that to to the American public? You've been debunking a subject for 75 years, and now you're like, oh yeah, that's real. So people there's a big blank space there. That's a 75-year gap of education. So we thought secrecy to transparency was a great subline. And this is the format or the trajectory of the conference. It's kind of like a bell curve. So we start with accidental truth, which takes place at the beginning of 2017 with Luis Elizondo stepping out of the Pentagon and talking about the Advanced Era Threat Identification Program, ATIP, and what proceeds from there, the governmental hearings that have taken place, the testimonies, the whistleblowers, and the backlash that they've experienced. So this is how we begin the conference, because we're trying to bring people into a big picture awareness of the UFO phenomenon. And then we kind of step back into history. So then we have Don Schmitt. Well, first we have Stacy Wright talking about not only just MUFON and opening the conference and welcoming everyone as the state director of Arizona, but we also have her talking about the Anunnaki and a little bit about the ancient history past of UFOs and Sumerian culture and things like that. Then we tie it into what's going on currently the number of sightings as we were mentioning before, in Canada and the United States, and the number that don't get reported and why, and what MUFON does. From there, Don Schmitt takes the floor. Well, then I'm going to show a short little clip about the nuclear bombs and what it was like for certain GIs on a ship based outside of Nagasaki, witnessing that explosion.
Really?
Because
Wow.
that is the turning point. And if people hear the firsthand experience of what it was like for them, I think that's powerful. And that's like 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Then Don Schmitt is going to take the floor, and he's going to talk about Roswell. And everything went on with the 509th Bomb Squad and why they were the most highly trained, military installation at the time, and what was going on with radar and what probably really happened at Roswell that people probably know about, but it's been debunked for so long, they don't know what to believe, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about Roswell. And then from there, I believe that afternoon is going to be, then we have David Hatcher Childress. That's right. I knew there was another great. And David, of course, is an expert on the Nazis and the Second World War agenda that moved to Antarctica. So he's going to be talking about what happened when World War II ended, where the Nazis went, who they were working with, and what was that story about Admiral Byrd with 14 ships in 1947 that goes to Antarctica and returns with loss of life and ship damage and a story, right? What's that about? So we're kind of like really marking what happened in the Second World War and Admiral Byrd and Antarctica. And then that brings us up to us talking about the Travis Walton story as a major piece. And then that's all day Saturday. Then Sunday morning, people have off. They can, it's a church where we're having the conference. So church services happen. So everybody has Sunday morning off to sleep in and digest and take a hike, see Sedona, connect with other people. Then at noon, Don Schmitt is going to come back and talk about J. Allen Hynek and the Blue Years, because that's the next section of history, right? And how J. Allen Hynek had to debunk the subject. And then what happens when he leaves and starts CUFOS, the Center for UFO Studies, which still exists today and which Don ran for many years after J. Allen Hynek's passing. Then we have Melinda Leslie talking about what's going on right under the ground in Sedona, about underground bases and work and research she's done with Ross Coulthart. And then we may have a new surprise guest who may come in to do closure at the conference and direct our panel. I know that they are available. I haven't completely discussed it with them, but I love them dearly, and I think they'd really like to come. That's JJ and Desiree Hertz. They'll be in Sedona, and they would love to come to the conference, so I think I'm going to have them close the Sunday evening conference, directing our panel and pointing where we need to look in the future, because JJ is like, a spiritual mentor in the UFO field. Yeah. And has such wisdom to impart. So it's designed to be a really moving experience for everyone who comes. I mean, you're going to walk away from this conference with a breadth of insight that if you know something or you know nothing about the UFO field, it should be touching, and you should come away with a better understanding and hopefully have a positive feeling about our potential interaction with intelligent species, because I fear, as many do, that we will be sold a story that we are being invaded by aliens. And that's why the world has to unite and fight against them. And we need more money for military operations and spending. I mean, isn't this what von Braun warned against? He told us many things we would be fighting against, including a war on terror and things like this, and a war on drugs and a war on cancer. And now we're going to have a war on the aliens. So I think people need to take a deep breath, like I was talking about before, develop trust and inner integrity, and not necessarily be fooled if they're going to be told that story. I think that's very important. So that's how I hope to end the conference. Then we have a lovely dinner in Tlaquepaque if people want to sign up for that. And the close of the conference happens Monday morning. And this I'm very excited about. So some of you may know about the New Paradigm Institute set up by Jim Garrison. And last year, he started the very first ever UFO Awareness Day, which is always going to be October 20th. So our conference ends October 20th, and we will be part of the New Paradigm Institute's World Disclosure Day. So that's different presenters from around the world talking about the importance of acknowledging the UFO phenomenon, doing it with courage and with grace and with heart-centered compassion for the reality shift that it makes for us, right, as human beings, and not being afraid to address the truth. And then different watch parties, of which we will be one. There's probably about 3 or 4 watch parties that will tune in and give a message, and Don Smith will be giving our message from our watch party. So that's a great way to end the conference on a positive note, with connecting with people all around the world. So, this vision just kind of came to me after I saw last year's conference, and I was trying to think about, well, how could I pull off a 50th anniversary conference, and what would be the point and the purpose, and should I put my time and energy into it, because I'm probably just going to break even doing it, and should we try to focus on this? And I said yes. I mean, I watched the New Paradigm Institute's World Disclosure Day last year, and I went, that's it. I grabbed the calendar, looked at next year, figured out when that date was, and I booked the conference around that, because I thought that was the most important way to end it. And so anyone who comes, you don't have to come to the conference to tune into that. Anyone can Google the New Paradigm Institute and connect with that. And even if they can't come to the conference, I would highly encourage them to tune into the New Paradigm Institute's World Disclosure Day. And that will be Monday from about 10 till about noon on October 20th. And then our conference ends, and people can go out to lunch with newfound friends. They can drive home, or they can spend another night in Sedona if they want. So that's the plan. Wow. And then on the actual anniversary, which is November 5th, the Sedona Film Festival has decided that they would like to host Travis and do a screening of my film.
Oh,
so
nice.
Travis and I will be there on November 5th in Sedona again, which is about 2 weeks later. We'll be screening 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. the film, and we'll do Q&A, and we'll probably go out to dinner afterwards as well. If anyone wants to join us, they're welcome to. And I already know some people coming in from Canada and from Philadelphia and California just for the screening. They want to be there. They want to be with Travis on this anniversary, and they want to celebrate with him. So that's the goal. And really it's about recognizing all the members of the crew and helping them, celebrate and recognize the contribution they've made, because it's been a huge contribution. I mean, don't you agree?
Oh, you go ahead, Alex.
No, you go first. You go first.
Oh, no, I mean, just listening to you and all the work that's involved in a coordination, and it's just a lot of work. And
you know it. Yeah. You've helped run symposiums too, and
yeah.
It's a huge amount of work. Well, I do have some experience, because I did the 2014 and the 2018 MUFON symposium in Cherry Hill. So I have a little bit of experience, and I was a former event coordinator. So if I don't get it right, shame on me, right?
Sounds like it's going to be a very successful event.
Yeah, and it's not large. It's not large. We only have 165 seats. That's it.
I wanted to share with you. Wow. Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's in a church. It's in a small venue. Yeah, I wanted to make it easy. I wasn't going to try to get 1,000 people there. It's just, I'm ready to retire, right?
Yeah.
You were to say something, Ruben?
I was going to, and I was going to share with both of you when we were talking about how these small communities, these small towns are putting together festivals. And both my good friend Noe Torres and I worked together with the city of Presidio, and we put on a conference that was centered around the Mexico's Roswell, the case that happened of a small plane that crashed with a UFO over on the Mexican side of the border, about 40 miles from Presidio. So we had a conference, and we have invited Travis to be a speaker on several occasions. And I remember I had to go pick up Travis at El Paso Airport, and I rented this red Impala. They were really beautiful car, right? And then it dawned on me, I said, it takes about 4 hours to drive from El Paso to Presidio. And I thought to myself, how am I going to keep Travis entertained? But what we're going to talk about, you know? And then as we're driving, I said, I didn't have to say anything. He just talked and shared, and I thought, man, this is better than a conference. You know, I have him in the car seat, and I think somebody's walking in. So anyway, thank you. All right. So anyway,
it's just like when you and I had that chance to be in a car for a week in
in
England. When you get bright minds together who are thinking outside the box like you, it's an incredible experience. And I've had the same encounter. I've gotten to drive many places now with Travis, across Pennsylvania and up into New York State and up into New England as well. And there's never a dull moment. That's what's so impressive about Travis. His mind is, very articulate, very bright, and he's a very deep thinker on many, many, many subjects. And that's what's fascinating to me. So, and of course, he now has something like 18 grandchildren.
Really? Wow.
Yes, and they're all kind of in the northern Arizona area, mostly. Some are down here in Phoenix, but many of them are up there. So he has a large extended family that's very loving, and a lot of them are musicians. And it's young grandson named JP, I believe his name is. He's with him right now in Montreal, where he's gone up to shoot some sort of interview up there. In fact, I just got a text. They just landed at the airport.
Nice.
So it's wonderful that he has this large extended family that has accepted this reality. And his grandchildren will go on to be those that stand in the shoes of Travis's story.
Yeah.
As, honoring their grandfather and knowing him as just a real down-to-earth guy, who they can call to come over and see if he can help fix their car, or, figure out what school report they should do. Or, he shows up to see them in local parades and things like that. And gymnastic competitions and stuff. I'm always hearing, oh, my granddaughter won this or that. And I'm seeing videos, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful for him. So he is an incredibly important person for the UFO world, for UFO history, but he's a real down-to-earth guy as well. He's never let it go to his head. And that's one of the things I really like about him. In fact, if anything, he really shies away from the limelight that comes his way. And he'll often say when pressed, if you could do something over again, would you get out of the truck? And he said, no way, no way. If I knew what was coming my way, I wouldn't have gotten out of the truck. But his curiosity and his, intelligence was such that he just figured this thing was going to fly away in 2-3 seconds. And he wanted a really good look at it before it did. I think it got more of a look than he was bargaining for. Right? He got to see inside the craft. And
yeah, and it's just up to a point, right? When he had being on the table, and then him escaping and being guided by the Nordic being.
In fact, this is another important little film clip for historical purposes. that we deliberately produced, not only for the documentary, but I also put it up online on the website in a way that it doesn't actually exist in the film. The film, we shot not necessarily an animation, but we did a reenactment of the onboard the craft experiences in a studio with Ron James. And we shot this in about 2016, I think, in California, because we knew we had to remake the film, because I had a rights issue with some of the archival footage I put in the film. Even though I paid for it, licensed it, agreed, had emails back and forth and a contract, the guy who owned the footage never signed my contract. So after I produced the film and started to win awards, I had to take 4 minutes of film footage out of the film and then replace it. So I thought, okay, if I have to remake this film, as I did in 2017 into 2018, I'm going to make it better. So I got a few more interviews, and I also did this reenactment of the onboard the craft experience. So we animated some of it, but most of it is just shot in a studio. And that's up online at the website, at the debunking page. And it's called Onboard the Craft Experiences. And it's about an 8-minute film segment. And this is the part that Travis remembers. And I'm happy, if we have the time, I can give a brief synopsis of this.
Yeah.
So he is gradually starting to come to consciousness. And we don't know how long that process was. When you wake up from anesthesia, you're kind of like, whoa, what's going on? You're trying to figure out what's happening around you. So he said he started to become aware that he was in terrible pain, and he had very difficult time breathing. He could barely breathe, and he was in terrible pain in his chest. But he could feel heat coming down into his chest. But he couldn't see much at all. But he knew he was in some type of care facility. He thought he was in a hospital, and he thought he was being cared for by nurses or doctors. He couldn't hear much and he couldn't see much, but he was in this state for a while. And there was this device across his chest, like a semicircle light panel of some sort. He describes it with heat and light pulsing down into his body, which I find absolutely fascinating, because we have red light therapy now, right? We didn't have that in 1975. And we have pulsed magnetic healing devices, right? We didn't have that in 1975. But he's got some sort of device across him. And it's large. It's got a little bit of a lip on the top. And finally, his eyes can focus on this thing that's right about here in his eyesight. And then his eyesight can start to focus further and further. And he then sees people that he thinks are doctors with what he thinks are white caps on and face masks, right? Then he begins to focus better, and he realizes, well, those aren't doctors. Those are big black eyes. Those are gray heads. And there's almost nothing to the bottom of the face. So that means that they're gray aliens, and he freaks out. Three of them kind of lean over together in unison, they lean over because they realize he's coming too. And they're like, oh, let's poke him. Can he see us? Can he respond? And Travis freaks out. So he wails, he gathers all the energy he can, and he wails his arm up and hits one of them. And he said it felt like hitting somebody who was like a 95 or 100-year-old woman, very frail, very lightweight. And this being loses its balance and falls back on the being behind him. And the two of them that kind of stumble and are shocked. And then they kind of come back up, and they look at him, and they look at the other one. And Travis rolls off the table. This device falls off of him, and he sees there are some medical tools on a table next to him. And he grabs one of them because he thinks it is like a glass rod. And he thinks if he can break this on the metal table he was on, he could use that as something to defend himself against these scary creatures. So he banging on this metal table with what we used a lucite handle from a toilet plunger when we did the film. But Travis said, that's pretty close. That's what it looked like, the bottom of it off, right? He said, that's pretty good, Jen. So he's banging it, trying to break it, but he can't break it. And he's flailing this thing at the three aliens that are standing there looking at him. And the aliens pick their hands up and try to get into his head and calm him down or paralyze him. And I think because Travis had some type of shock hit him electrically that affected his nervous system, they couldn't do what they were trying to do. But Travis felt like this pressure in his brain. He said, man, they were working hard at trying to subdue me, and they couldn't. So the three of them kind of look at each other, like, oh, what do we do now? And then they kind of turn in unison and leave the room, which is a small, low ceiling, hard to breathe, stuffy, like medical room that's barely tall enough for Travis. So he walks out, goes the opposite way, which is a rounded hallway, and tries to find a way out of this craft because these beings have left him now. And he walks around in a circle and finds a central room, which he suspects was the middle of this craft. And he sees an egg chair in it. And we now have modern egg chairs that look just like this. We used one in the film when we did the reenactment. So he walks around the outside edge because he doesn't know if there's a gray being in this chair. And he's afraid there is because he can only see the back of it. He walks around the edge of the room and realizes there's nobody in the chair. So then he starts to walk close to the chair. And as he does, the room sort of changes. There's some type of proximity sensor in the room. And the floors, the walls, the chair, the ceiling, everything becomes a planetarium. And there's stars. And he's kind of freaked out by that. He takes a couple steps back and it fades. Then he walks again closer to the chair and he realizes, okay, this is like a navigation room. This is a control room. Maybe this is flight control or something. And he walks up to the chair. I think he sits down in the chair for a minute and starts to play with the knobs and buttons that are on the handles where the hands would be of this chair. And then when he does that, the star system starts moving.
Yeah.
He gets nauseous and thinks, oh my God, what have I done? He's just trying to find a door that's going to open so he can get out of this craft. At that point, he hears something like somebody going or somebody's feet, stamping or something. He hears something and he looks up over the edge of this egg chair. And that's when he encounters the Nordic guy standing there. Physical body like a man, like a human, blonde hair, goldeny blue eyes, a glass helmet on, blue jumpsuit with maybe a little black neckline, a black insignia, black belt, and black boots. We used scuba boots when we did this, and a blue band suit that we bought online. But Travis said, well, did a good job. That's kind of what it looked like. So Travis runs up to this person because he figures it's NASA. It's an astronaut. It's a human, right? He's blabbering. Can you tell me how to get out of this craft? Can you tell me where we are? Can you, And the guy doesn't say a thing. But he has a light in his glass helmet that kind of lights his face. He grabs Travis by the arm and he walks him around the craft, out of the room, around a hallway to a set of sliding doors that open. And then they're in like a gap, a little bit of a gap. And the doors close behind him. Travis can immediately start to breathe better. He's still in great pain in his chest. And then other doors open, and suddenly they are on the outside of the craft. It's the same craft Travis saw in the forest. He can kind of look down and see the edge of it, almost touch it. It's gray metal, and there's a steep ramp down. And they walk down, and he turns around and looks at the craft, and it's on like 3 or 4 pedals, legs holding it up. It's a disc-shaped craft. And they're in some sort of large hangar-type room, they think. He doesn't know exactly what it was. Was it a mother craft? Was it an underground base? Were they on another planet? A mothership of some sort? We are, an aircraft carrier? We don't know where they were. But it's a room that has a rounded, sort of half-rounded ceiling, like a greenhouse ceiling would have. It's very high, right? You could have parked a Boeing jet in there, and from what he describes and from the drawings and pictures that Mike Rogers did. And then off to the side are other crafts sitting there that are different. This is the cool thing. He said they look like shiny metal eggs or Tic Tacs, right? What we now see, or we're told, were Tic Tacs. And I think he said there were either 3 or 5 of them, kind of all huddled down at the end of one end of this, room they're in, hangar for the better word, airplane hangar of some sort. And they're walking towards a straight wall with some windows and doors in it. that makes up the flat side of this room they're in. And they got to the other side and they're walking across what he also describes as like some kind of tarmac, kind of like a gym floor that you might find in a typical gym, maybe, you know, a rubber floor of some sort. They get to this flat wall, double doors open. They walk into a hallway. It's like a medical facility. They walk down one hall, turn to the right, go into another room on the left. There's 3 other beings in there, all with the same outfits, but without helmets. 1 woman and 2 men. And they take him from the guy with the helmet. They grab him. Meanwhile, Travis is like, where are we? What's happening? Where are you taking me? He's asking millions of questions. Nobody's talking to him. Nobody's telepathically communicating anything to him. Those 3 people take him, knock him, put him down on a table, force him down, and put a mask over his face. Travis gets his fingers under the edge of the mask, tries to push it away. They hold him down stronger, and in 2 seconds, Travis is out. That's all he remembers. So that's the core memory. Is that a 2-hour period of time? Is that 20-minute period of time? Is it 15 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? Big question mark. We don't know. Travis doesn't know. But next he knows, he wakes up on side of the road, 260, I think it is, Route 260, that comes down into Heber from the high side where the Circle K is. As you go down into town, it's kind of a windy switchback road with big rock boulders and stones around the side. And he wakes up on the side of that road and gets up. First, he sees a light around him. His head is on his arm. He wakes up, lifts his head up, and he sees a light around him. And he thinks, is that a street light? Is that a street lamp? Where am I? And he looks up to see if it's a street light. And it's the craft above him. And that the light is kind of shining on him. And then it closes up and the craft flies away in an instant. And he gets up. He's still in pretty bad shape, but he's not in this, he can breathe, and he's not in the same kind of pain he was. And he walks down, stumbles, I should say, down into Heber and finds a phone booth. And that's where the story kind of continues from there.
Yeah.
Quite an interesting journey he had.
Amazing. Are the phone booths still there? I've been to.
Yes. In fact, they're right between a little garage place that works on cars and does tires and Casa Ramos, which is a Mexican restaurant. And as I understand, there's been a battle for the phone booths. Every once in a while, the restaurant will put a chain around them and drag them 10 feet onto their parking lot. And then the garage says, no, they're ours. And they drag them back. And so they've had some damage to them now. But yes, you can still go there and get your photo taken in the phone booth. And it was the middle phone booth that he made the phone call from, because the first one he went into didn't have a dial tone. And he called an operator who, because he didn't have a dime in his pocket. So in those days, you could pick up the phone, get an operator, and make a collect call. So he made a collect call to his sister who lived near Heber. He didn't call his mom, who was an hour, 45 minutes away, or 35-minute drive. He called his sister, who was about 15, 20 minutes away. And he was expecting to get his sister and his sister's husband on the phone. And instead, his brother Dwayne was there and also picked up the phone. But Dwayne lived in Phoenix. So it was very confusing for Travis. But that's who he called. And they almost hung up on him. And another really interesting thing that I don't think we had in the movie is the operator knew darn well who Travis Walton was, because people have been looking for him, and it's all national news, right, for the 5 days he was missing. So she stayed on the phone and listened to the phone call. And when it was done, she picked up the phone and called Marlon Gillespie and said, Travis is back, and he's in a phone booth in Heber. So he got picked up by his brother-in-law, but the police were there 15 minutes later dusting for prints. So they knew when he was returned. Very
amazing.
Yeah, I know that.
Little details, like I said, when you know the story, when you start to, it's amazing. See, all this could be in a new feature film that could be really good.
Yeah.
If we could get some great Hollywood producer to want to do it, it'd be great. Right?
It'd make for a great movie for sure.
Yeah. It'll happen.
That's right. And I always like to throw out kudos to my nephew, Adam Stein, who really helped me edit this film. And he is a Hollywood producer now, but I don't know if he would ever consider doing a feature film about this. But boy, wouldn't that be interesting? Yeah. Yeah, he really helped me edit this film from a 4-hour film I had down to the actual hour and a half. He and Zach Wilde, a friend of his, did a magnificent job. And I am not the skilled filmmaker that he is. And I really give credit to Adam for understanding the story, reading the book, and doing the edit that they did was magnificent.
It's so hard to, have that much good material and really kind of narrow it down. I'm sure that you could almost produce, second and third movie just from that original material sometimes.
Oh, yes. A miniseries. I mean, there's enough material there, especially with the debunkers that are so fascinating. You could definitely have a miniseries out of this for sure. Yeah.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Well, I think there are some miniseries out now on UFO subjects, which is great. I mean, I think Taken was one of the first ones, and that was really done very well.
Yeah, that was a pretty good one.
Really good one.
Based on actually a lot of true facts that, people think, oh, they made all this stuff up. Well, not completely. When you talk to the people who have had those experiences, they'll say, oh man, they took it right from the horse's mouth.
They wove just so many good stories and different backgrounds into one cohesive story. The acting was great too. One of my favorite actors was actually in there for one of the roles. So just a great cast to see.
Mm-hmm. And Peter Robbins was involved in helping to promote that when it first came out, the whole miniseries Taken.
Well, Jennifer, it's been fantastic to speak with you.
Fantastic.
I feel like we could continue talking to you for hours.
Alex and Ruben, thank you so much for this opportunity and for your support and your kindness over the years. It's makes a huge difference, and for your trust. That's really where we need to figure out where we're going forward, because
Exactly.
Without trust and without dialogue, and we're sunk in this world, right?
It's true.
Yeah. Thank you for this opportunity. Blessings to you both.
And
to
you.
your audience. I hope they've enjoyed this.
Thank you. Well, we will see you next time, Ruben. And
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Perfect. Ciao.